Mini episode 1110 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1110. It is always a special occasion when you have three original FDH Lounge dignitaries back together as you have today. I, Rick Morris, Jason Jones, and Chris Galloway, the three of us are getting together to talk NFL draft. The three of us usually get together to do a preview, as we're doing today, and a recap after the event subsequently here. So great to get them back on the show here. Original dignitary Chris Galloway, always a pleasure, my man. Thanks for being available.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Love having you here, and also our esteemed senior editor at FDH, Jason Jones, all the way from the compound in Colorado. How you doing today, Jason?
Oh, not too bad. Just wrapped up a nice ham and Hasselbeck potato Easter dinner, so not bad. Son of a... There we go. All right. We're all good.
Okay, yeah, well, a little something almost happened there, I guess, but we're good. And we'll start this with, and again, as I had mentioned to you guys off here, that, of course, the show is based out of Cleveland and always has been, and I always try to be cognizant of the fact that, I mean, outside of being a punchline all these years, the Browns weren't really important enough nationally to merit a lot of coverage on our show. This year, I'm not really worrying about that as much because they're a huge story, and a lot of it dates back a year to this point in time, because in our draft guide for 2018, in my lead story, I said that as opposed to a certain player or group of players, I thought a year ago the Browns were the story of the draft. Picks at 1 and at 4, 2 picks early in the second round. It was a chance to control the draft in a way that you don't generally see teams do. And John Dorsey getting off to a start, again, not to jinx things, but almost sort of reminiscent of 89-90 with the Cowboys here as far as what they were able to reel in with the draft picks. So I'm going to start on this note with Chris, advisedly so, because we've always been fond, from day one in 2007, we've always been fond of shoot comments about the dignitaries here on the show. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you about this with John Dorsey and your thoughts on this. If you were, Chris, to, let's use the term, audit the Browns offseason here, the weights and measures of what the Browns have been able to do in the last 365 days, would it get your sticker of approval? I think it would.
All very corny, and yes. It would earn one of my now famous stickers, Rick.
I like those stickers. I like them.
I mean, listen, he's taken a unit of the defensive line that we had a couple of holes, and he's now filled them. With Sheldon Richardson and with Vernon on the end opposite of Myles Garrett, both those guys should allow Myles Garrett a lot less pressure in terms of what he does best, in terms of rushing the passer. So that in and of itself, by itself, was already a great start to the offseason. Putting aside the discussion of his personal history, obviously picking up Kareem Hunt, making him available after the NFL was ruled for 8 games, and I'm not going to talk about the personal stuff, but just looking at it from a football player standpoint, he added a top 5 running back to go with what you could argue is our other top 5 running back.
He is top 5, yes.
And so now suddenly our cup runneth over. Now, all that by itself would be considered a very, very good offseason for the Cleveland Browns. And then, of course, to go and pull the OBJ rabbit out of the hat and to fulfill the wildest fantasies of Brown fans around the world. You know, folks were pining for it and hoping for it. And, to live vicariously through Jarvis Landry on the internet, hoping that somehow OBJ would be under their Christmas tree as a present and on Christmas morning, and lo and behold, John Dorsey got it done. And we all know that you just do not get arguably the best wide receiver in the league in his prime to come and play. You don't snatch a guy like that up. Period. It just doesn't happen. And to be able to do that and to pair him with Baker Mayfield, a guy who can swing it accurately down the field, what that is all going to do for this offense in terms of opening it up for the aforementioned Mr. Chubb, Mr. Hunt, and Mr. Duke Johnson, who's still around, and of course David Njoku, who will now be punishing linebackers down the middle who can't keep up with him. Landry over the middle in the slot. I think you're going to see actually the biggest thing out of Galloway. I think Galloway is a huge benefactor in this whole thing. I just don't see anybody. I mean, the Browns right now in the early breakout are favored in all but 3 games right now in Vegas. And I think that's because of that offense. You look at that offense and you say, there's weapons everywhere, at every level. And now, if you're a defensive coordinator, how do you stop that? So from that standpoint, John Dorsey has hit a grand slam. He has done I guess for Cleveland, he has done the opposite of Paul Dolan in the offseason.
Very much.
And made the Browns instant contenders in the AFC.
They have, and again, very glad you mentioned, because I don't think it can be mentioned on this show enough. I mentioned it to Mike Harmon from Fox Sports a couple weeks ago, and he didn't exactly disagree with me about Nick Chubb being at least potentially a top 5 back in this league in his own right, based on what we saw from him last year. And let's not sleep on the front 4 also now, with the additions of Vernon and Richardson. And you and I talked about this off air, Chris, that those are guys in particular, when they're in the right system, when they're where they need to be up front in a proper 4-3 alignment, they can be very dangerous, and they will be used to their full benefit this year. Jason, I know for certain as I turn to you, it's not going to be a more pessimistic take from you than we heard from Chris.
First, let me just take a step back. At some point, I'm going to need to hear this story about these stickers, but we'll move on from that for a moment. Look, as a football fan, I have a tendency, I'm sure both of you are very familiar with, to err on the side of optimism. So, this entire offseason, I've basically been the kid that wakes up on Christmas morning every day. Going, what happened now? This is unreal, because as you mentioned, the show hails from Cleveland. It's the city of origin and all of that. So it's always been a special focus for us on our own time. Never have I once in my adult life, I'm 40 now, have we had this.
Nope.
Where you can go into games and say, no, we have as much of a chance as everyone else does, which is not something even half the teams in the league can say. So the Beckham thing, I've heard both sides of it, and I'm not trying to hear it. I think that him, where he was, frustration of just aging Eli, not being able to get the ball out anymore, and on top of that, they were losing. So there's that. He comes to a team, arguably, that gives him the best quarterback he's ever had, the best defense he's ever had, the best running game he's ever had, and maybe even the best offensive line he's ever had. So all that's great, and I think Jarvis kind of keeps him on an even keel. Now, you guys mentioned Nick Chubb, and I did a breakdown just on my own time because I was kind of getting annoyed with the Barkley's clear favorite to win Rookie of the Year over Baker, which I still to this day blame the table about. But long story short, if you look at every single game that Nick Chubb had, where he had more than, wait for it, 10 touches, that's it, 10 touches, he is actually 3% better than Barkley was in games that he had at least 10 touches. So Chubb's absolutely in that top 5 conversation. Hunt will make for a heck of a punch in the middle of the season, consider everything we still have. I say we get a little too excited here. What the Browns have. And then you look at what assets they still control.
Yep.
And they're in a lovely position. We don't need to spend much time on the national media, outside of ourselves, but, it goes either way depending on who you're listening to.
Right.
But my overall take on it is, not since, 1994 or so, has this team even been considered a playoff favorite.
Right.
So all of that, and then you include the roster building, which is another point I've been dying to make. There's tons of people out there who wanted Bradley Chubb to go opposite Garrett.
Right.
And I've been sort of railing against that because the genius of what happened on that front line, it really speaks to a bigger roster building situation. Do I think that Vernon is ever going to be a 20-sack guy? Good grief, no. He doesn't need to be.
Right.
Garrett is the 15-plus, maybe he gets the 20 sacks a season kind of guy. And if you had Garrett and Chubb right about the same time, you're going to have the same salary problem. I don't think Vernon ever comes close to talking max dollars. And then the same thing with Ogunjobi and Sheldon.
Yeah.
This whole front line is sustainable, which is nuts in today's NFL.
Right.
Beckham's probably going to get a big contract at some point.
Sure.
Jarvis is probably going to still have a significant contract, so there are going to be salary issues.
Right.
But from a roster building standpoint, you got to take a step back and go, I think John might actually know what he's doing, and maybe, just maybe, invented a new blueprint for the NFL, which not a lot of fans know, because that means you basically tank completely for like 2 or 3 years. But if you do that, he has created a way that you can bounce back quickly. So very impressive. Gotta love what they're doing. And I've not been this excited for a football season ever, literally.
Well, and it's funny, Jason, because Chris and I did a segment on this back in January, just sort of recapping the season. We called it sort of a review of a Hard Knocks season. I felt we were justified in doing it because they'd been on Hard Knocks. So I felt we could indulge ourselves by doing a Browns segment. And I said to Chris, now granted, it was all downhill from there. The last season where I couldn't wait for opening day, like from the end of the previous season, was going into 1990. It was in the fall of 1990 that Chris and I met and became friends at the Harvard on the Hockin. So the entirety of our friendship, he has not known me to be greatly anticipating the start of the next season. I don't count the Bill Belichick mirage crap of 94, 95. That team wasn't built to last. 02, 03, it was still Botch running the team, and he still wanted to go with barbecue sauce Holcomb over Tim Couch. 07, 08, I had some optimism, but again, the Browns did what they did. They panicked when they had a bad year and fired Phil Savage, and it's been all downhill since then, which to me is cause and effect.
I remember those conversations.
Well, yeah, I was very bitter about them firing Phil Savage and not giving him a chance to hire another coach. But again, John Dorsey, the job he's done, and I will say this. I said to our friend and fellow FDH Lounge dignitary, Anthony Petrone, who had the absolutely insane take that, Hugh Jackson deserves to come back in 2018 because he had nothing to work with last year. I said it wasn't 0-16 bad, Anthony. There's been 2 of those since 1978. It wasn't 0-16 bad. But I said to him recently, you were right for all the wrong reasons. Because if everything hadn't happened exactly the way it was, it's the butterfly theory of history. Kill a butterfly and who knows what happens from there if you go back in time. It's the same thing. Like, we needed everything to be where it was going into 2018 for things to unfold as they were. So he was right, but for all the wrong reasons. But all that matters is that we're here now, and we made it. And by the way, I separately got to live the OBJ moment with even a little more personal feeling just a couple of days ago as my man Steve Yzerman comes back to the Red Wings to run that team now. So the same kind of joyousness, and we have been saved, and yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the Stevie Y situation because you were not the first person that I saw, mention that. Right. But you were the first person I thought of. And the first time I saw it, it was another friend of ours that just posted something on social media, and I actually sat back in my chair at work and went, "Oh, Rick is loving the hell out of this."
Jason,
so congrats on both levels there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Jason, it's safe to say, for anyone who knows me, I am the first person they thought of. I'm the first person that dozens of people thought of the other day when that happened. And yeah, I am back. And as I said to Chris, we have seen the rebirth of Rick Morris, obnoxious Red Wings fan. And as far as I'm concerned, he's been away for far too long. But, it's great to feel that way about the Browns as well. And I'm going to start with you, Jason, here on the personnel side and looking at this draft. This is the thing where meat and potatoes, trenches, that's kind of what comes to mind when people are talking about the draft here. I mean, if you throw in offensive tackle as well, trenches on both sides of the ball, but defensive tackle, defensive end, it is top-heavy. But it has great depth as well. I mean, it has the best of both worlds. You've got Joey Bosa at the top and Quinnen Williams and the guys like that, Josh Allen and those guys. But you've also got the depth that comes from there. It looks like one of the greatest defensive line drafts of all time. And to a lot of people, Jason, that's the sort of takeaway story position-wise.
Yeah, no, it is. However, I want to tread lightly a little bit here because if one were to just sort of do the typical 9 to 5 casual fan thing and just sort of watch SportsCenter, watch NFL Network, listen to the guys in the car on the way to and from work, you're going to get the impression that defensive tackle probably goes 2, if not 3 rounds deep. Offensive tackle, the same thing. Guard is even deeper. And the more I look at it, the more, if you're not grabbing that position of, let's say, enthusiasm in this draft, if you're not picking that in the first 50 picks, you're not going to benefit from what is being talked about.
Right.
Now, I will say I've got about 3 defensive tackles that I absolutely love outside of the top 50.
Okay.
But that's 3 out of another 20 that are there. Mm-hmm. I think if you're looking at pass rush in general, and at this point anybody from the Bosa family lining up on the edge is probably a smart idea. And then in addition to that, I absolutely love Josh Allen, but he might be the only purely 4-3 outside linebacker that I'm absolutely in love with. So be cautious. Yes, it is absolutely a defensive tackle draft through the first 6 guys, a defensive end draft through the first 8 guys. Offensive tackle is still pretty good, even though most of them were right tackles into the 5th and 6th guy. And then there's a drop-off, and then there's still some guys out there like Caleb McGarry that are very nice, but don't think you're going to turn them into a franchise left tackle. And guard is deeper, but the starting point is later. And there's about 2 or 3 centers in here that are absolutely day one starters, which is really impressive. So yes, trenches is an area of focus, and most teams will probably want to address that early. I'm not as excited about the quarterbacks. I think there's about 5 running backs throughout the whole draft that are really all that impressive. So, you got to pick your spots, and I think where you get them will be more important than who you get in this particular draft.
I think you're right about that. And Chris, in looking at this, again, it's a fairly decent wide receiver draft as well. It doesn't stack up to 2014, but based on the post 2014 standards, it seems pretty good. But the trenches seem to be getting a lot of the attention here, and from a media perspective, it's very interesting because I think we've reached that point now where nothing can sort of dampen the media enthusiasm for the NFL draft. I can remember a time, and it might have been, even 10 or 15 years ago, when there might be a little bit of dampened enthusiasm for the draft if it wasn't thought to be as high on skill position players. Running back, there's no franchise players projected. The quarterbacks are, the 2 best ones are 1-year starters, so there's question marks there. So from a media perspective, Chris, and looking at this, it almost seems to me like it shows you how bulletproof the NFL is, that they can go in there where the beef guys are the story of it, and people seem to care just as much.
Well, I think the proliferation of the number of shows and the publications and the podcasts, I actually think fans are probably probably more educated
Yes.
on some of the nuts and bolts of football than they were, 20, 30 years ago.
Totally
where
agree.
you were really just focused on the flashy guys, and now people understand, like, boy, this is why you need a tackle. This is why your guards are so important. They're not throwaway. Your entire run game is predicated on your guard play. People have really started to understand, I think, more so some of the nuance, and then that becomes sort of bulletproof in terms of the draft, where you can have the big uglies, as they used to call them, the guys that the league is sort of pushing as future stars and certainly stars in this draft, and those positions are vitally important, and I think fans are finally recognizing it. So it's not all about wide receivers. And looking at a draft like this, I mean, I actually liking more of the tight ends in this draft than I am the wide receivers.
Preach.
So, there's a few guys at the top that I think there's a bunch of guys in this draft as wide receiver that can just be absolute busts that people think are going to be great. And I would start with, guys like, Hakeem Butler at Iowa State. You look at him and you go, yep, he's got it all. And Metcalf is another one who'll probably go top 15, but that guy could be a total bust. I think A.J. Brown, his counterpart, could end up being a much better wide receiver long term in the league. And I gotta say, I think a guy like Andy Isabella is going to be, he's going to be another Edelman. I'm not high on any of the Ohio State guys. You've got some old, Hunter Renfrow is like 42 years old. I'm not really enamored with the overall group of the wide receivers this year. Although I think Neil Harry there, or however you pronounce his name.
N'Keal Harry.
He could be something special, I think. But you get into those tight ends, and I gotta say, I'm even high on a guy like, sort of getting into the Nuggets, getting into that 4th, 5th round territory. A guy like Josh Oliver out of San Jose State. He's got the size, the physicality, great hands. No one's really talking about him. They're all focused on the two kids from Iowa, who I think probably realistically only one of them, and Hawkinson, is going to be a star. I think if you need a tight end, this is a great draft to go ahead and grab one. When I look at the overall talent in this draft, I think I think the smart teams are gonna strike in rounds 1 and 2, and possibly rounds 1 and 2 and 3, and then they're gonna drop back into 6 and 7. I don't think there's a lot of great round 4 and 5 talent in this draft. I think there's guys that you can get in round 6, 7 that are going to be pretty comparable to rounds 4 and 5. So I'm kind of interested to see what kind of strategy teams have in terms of moving up and moving down. I think there's going to be a lot of that in this draft because the way that sort of I look at the way the talent lays out.
That might be the case, and again, as far as Iowa goes, Hawkinson and Fant, both of those guys. I don't know how Iowa ended up with two franchise tight ends like that, but you got them. You got Irv Smith Jr., who some people think could make it into the first round from Bama. This is one of these things, and again, only true draft nerds are going to understand where I'm going with this one. I'm going to put this out to you guys here. So, Jason, I took your challenge of doing, I don't think I'd ever gone past the first round for a mock draft, but the draft that I'm putting together, and again, everyone can check this out, Pro Football Draftology 2019, available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com and the FDHlounge.com. So going 50 deep instead of just the top 32. So doing that, I had in there the chance to address Washington in the second round. And we all know there's nothing that Washington loves like unfinished products at wide receiver. I got him taking Paris Campbell. You can see that one a mile away, boys.
Well, the wide receivers I always have fun with for some reason. And yes, this is not 2014.
Yeah.
I got to go back and say just one thing. While I absolutely loathe acting like DK Metcalf is the next Megatron, which is freaking laughable.
Okay.
The guy runs 2 routes, and one of them he's going to be exposed on. He's David Boston big, so there's a problem there. Added mass limits flexibility, and flexibility is key for being an elite wide receiver. So
got to have the hips, Jason. Got to have the hips.
You do.
Yeah.
And I have DK Metcalf going in the middle of the second round, where some people have him going as high as 4.
Okay.
So there's that. Now, in today's football, I would love to think that everybody's looking for what essentially is Keel Henry in this time around. One of those guys you look at that's got the size, got the speed, he's durable, and he pretty much can run every route on the route tree. He can do underneath stuff, he can go deep stuff. So, yeah, that is great. You just don't find many of those anymore.
Right.
So one guy I absolutely love, and it is boom or bust, let's be honest, it's Akeem Butler.
Okay.
I just love the upside. Now, with that, you're going to have to coach him up on drops and focus and all that stuff. But, man, when that guy is right, he's got a little A.J. Green and Randy Moss in him. So there's a part of me that says I would take that depending on the risk. Am I taking him in the 20s? Absolutely not. But, if a team likes someone in the middle of the road, is it drafting in the middle of the second round, I would think nothing of grabbing him and hoping for the best. That being said, going back to the tight ends, tight end is a lot like guard and safety, I think, where, you're going to see Hawkinson go super high.
Yeah.
You're going to see Fant probably go not that far behind him. And then, there's a good shot Irv Smith from Alabama makes his way into the back end of the first round. But then, to Chris's point, you got the kid from San Diego State. You got a guy from Stanford. You got a guy from Kentucky. And actually, one of my favorite might be, I can't even pronounce the guy's name. I want to say it's San Diego State. Give me just a second here.
Is it the kid from Georgia, Isaac Nauta?
No, but in a situation like Cleveland has, where you have your pass-catching tight end who, lacks a great ability to block all that well, if you go get Isaac Nauta, then that solves your problem. You basically get what you want from a guy like a Gronk or a Kelsey in 2 guys, which is an interesting idea. But the guy I'm talking about is Waring from San Diego State, 6'5", 250. Really shined in the combine, much better in the drill than I thought he'd be. And he does have tape that shows him as a pretty solid blocker. Not great, but solid. Tight end, there's going to be a lot of people that are itching to get Hawkinson because he feels like the next complete tight end in the NFL, and let's be honest, those are few and far between. Fant, I think, is another Njoku type. He's more exciting as a pass catcher, and Irv's a little small for my taste, but, people like him. But I think tight end, safety, guard, even linebacker to some secondary degree, you can do what Chris is talking about. You can get your guys, your elite guys up front in the first 2 rounds, and then drop back. You find a way, get more assets, because the difference between the guys you're going to get between picks 50 and picks, 100 aren't that much different from the guys you're going to get on day 3.
That's probably a very good point. One of the things I want to talk about, not because the talent level merits it, but because it's always a media story no matter what, because, again, it is the most important position by far in the NFL, that being quarterback, and so much of what we're talking about before with the Browns, obviously the first and most important piece of the puzzle is predicated on Baker Mayfield being a star, which he looks like right now. So if you get that one right, that lays the groundwork for everything else. That brings us to this year's draft, and it's one of these things where, and I'll start with you on this one, Chris, on the list of things that I am permanently cynical about, number one would be that federal spending will ever go down and not just be ever increasing. Another would be that Paul Dolan will ever make any kind of firm commitment to the Cleveland Indians. And another one would be silly season will always elevate quarterbacks. That is a permanent feature. As you hear us every year, I don't know, fellas, this might be the first year that we don't see a quarterback in the top 10. And I sit there every year and I go, you know what? These bozos will find a way to talk themselves into it. One of the most extreme examples of that is Kyler Murray, a guy who I'm not sure too many teams have in the top 10. He appears to be, bolted into first for Arizona because of Cliff Kingsbury. And again, high risk, high reward on that fella. I mean, I've seen comparisons to Steve Young, who, as I've said sort of tongue-in-cheek before, is the greatest black quarterback of all time, basically. So for, he really is. If you're talking about it in terms of the style, it's Steve Young. So if Kyler Murray is Steve Young, he's worth the first pick and that much more. But that's a high standard, as we know. So he has managed to work his way into that conversation. Dwayne Haskins actually seems to have slipped a little bit recently here because of mobility questions. And again, both he and Kyler Murray are one-year starters, and that is always a question mark for NFL teams. But what we've seen recently here, this boomlet, you can only call it that. I compare it to sort of what we see with the presidential candidates in Iowa, how there will be a boomlet around Mayor Pete or this or Beto O'Rourke or whatever. Now we're seeing it for Daniel Jones, and that, oh my God, he might be like a poor man's Peyton Manning. When you look at his accuracy and his headiness and all that kind of stuff, there's a chance he could go 6th to the Giants. Drew Lock, who is a good quarterback and has some upside, but again, nobody was penciling him in for that much a while ago here. There's talk of him possibly going to Denver at 10, and certainly in the first round here. So, Chris, this is one of these things where nothing anybody says ahead of time, no amount of pessimism about how this year's quarterbacks are going to be graded should ever be given an ounce of credence, because from that point to draft day, in between lies silly season, Chris, and people will talk themselves into believing whatever they want to believe.
Well, that's right, and I can. It's a stone cold lead pipe lock that there will be 4 quarterbacks in the top 20.
Yep.
I mean, and probably none of them really deserve to be, but they're going to go, and because it's a quarterback league, and desperate teams do desperate things. I mean, look, you never want to reach for somebody in the draft, but if you're going to reach for a player, really the only one based on importance that you can justify reaching for is quarterback. And so, I mean, you're right. I think that we're going to see Murray, Haskins, Lock, and Jones all go in the top 20. I wouldn't be shocked if it was all in the top 15.
Wow.
I mean, teams need quarterbacks. And listen, we as Browns fans, as 3 Browns fans, first of all, it's bizarre that we're going into a draft barely even looking at quarterback tape going, it doesn't matter.
That's right. I like it.
Doesn't matter. Don't care.
Yep.
That's a really strange place to be. It's for these teams that need him, the Giants and Denver, Flacco's not the long-term, he's not the long-term answer there. I think there's other teams out there that are going to think about, making a move like Cincinnati. Daniel Jones and his relationship with the Manning family and having those connections that he has, I wouldn't be shocked if they grab him at 6 and just say, forget it, we're going to get our quarterback, or we're not going to risk waiting until pick 17. I've seen people suggest they might even shock everybody and move up and take Kyler Murray number 1. I don't believe that. That doesn't seem to be a very Gettleman-type thing to do. But you're right, it's silly season, quarterbacks are too important, and people will start to ignore the negatives on these guys and only start to focus on the positives and hope and wish that one of them works out. There are a couple guys in here that I'm intrigued by, long term. I think it's interesting that the Browns, the only quarterback that they brought in and worked out was Gardner Minshew out of Washington State. I don't think he's a starter per se in the league, at least not initially, but he's the kind of guy that they might be interested in grabbing later in the draft as a second stringer to Baker. He certainly has shown a lot of accuracy and talent at Washington State. So I think keep an eye on him. I think the Browns are clearly interested in if they can get him in the right spot. And then another guy that I am kind of intrigued by is Will Greer. I think he kind of gets passed over for, some of the flash of a lot of these other guys and, how he jumped around in his career from Florida to West Virginia. But, I see a lot of things in him I do like. And with the way the NFL is going, I think a guy like him actually might have a chance, if he gets in the right system with good coaching, to have a long career in the league. Some of these guys are just pure speculation. You're getting down to the Tyree Jackson of Buffalo. There are some teams I've read actually. There are a couple teams that think are looking at him in the second round. So you get into this crazy season. That's we're talking that's crazy. But again, he's one of these guys where all the raw material that teams start to salivate over, and you never know what they may do. Then you've got a guy like Kyle Shermer, who's his father's a coach of the Giants. Somebody might grab him up in round 6 or something, and hope they get a 10-year backup out of that kid. Who knows? Might even be the Giants. So yeah, you're right. It's silly season. It's all about quarterbacks. Although I will say though, outside of the Murray thing, I haven't found the quarterback insanity this year to be that bad compared to some years past. I think it's seen as a group that's a little thin, a lot of long range prospects that people might want to bring in to try out. But everybody's waiting for 2020 and 2021 when some of these big college kids that are freshmen and sophomores will be coming out.
Yeah, that'll be the case. And you made a good point too, as far as whether it be Kyle Shermer, whether it be Gardner Minshew. Again, from my perspective as a Browns fan, I wouldn't fart at it if they were able to get themselves a Don Strock for the next 10 or 15 years. I realize I'm dating myself with that reference. Google it, kids. You'll understand what I'm talking about there. But that's a valuable piece to have because the Browns don't really have any depth at quarterback right now, and God forbid anything happens to Baker, the touchdown maker. So not that a guy like that's going to help you year one anyways, but at least going forward, it's a nice thing to have if you can have somebody who can be a clipboard holder who can come in and give you something. And this is one of these things, Jason, where, you look at quarterbacks and the tendency to squint and rationalize. We get this kind of a year. My favorite rationalization of any kind is he'll learn to blank at the pro level. Ben Simmons will learn to shoot at the NBA level. Lamar Jackson will learn to pass at the NFL level. Little easier said than done, buddy. And there's a lot of rationalization going around with these quarterbacks this year, Jay.
Yeah. Couple things real quick. As far as the lead in there, I think if Charlie Fry was the best quarterback in the draft, someone's finding a way to put him in the top 5.
Right.
That's just how this goes.
I agree.
The other real interesting thing, and this is going to sound a little homeristic, but if we're really honest with ourselves, looking at the dynamic of how the NFL has evolved over time, and 5 years ago, let's say, you had to have 6'3", 220 in a cannon. Otherwise, what are you doing?
Right.
And something just jumps out at me, and maybe it's just my own bias. If Baker Mayfield doesn't happen, if Baker Mayfield doesn't go to the Browns and doesn't do well, are we even talking about Kyler Murray? Because before Baker Mayfield, 6 foot was the line.
Yep.
And maybe that's why the baseball thing was so prevalent, was everyone before Baker got drafted said, you'll never play in the NFL. Right. So just throwing that out there, a little Browns shimmer, if you will. But
you're right.
You
are totally right.
Well, but again, getting back to the class we're looking at, the thing with Kyler that concerns me is I get that he fits Cliff Kingsbury's system perfectly. The concern there is he actually can throw the ball. So my concern would be designing too much of him running and what that could eventually do to his game.
Right.
Haskins, let's be honest, I like him. He's a really good college quarterback, but he's stone feet. He's going to be a pocket-only passer, and if he can do that, he can stay upright, then maybe he'll be good. I think Drew Lock is fool's gold, straight up. He's one of those guys you look at and say, man, he has got a cannon. He can fire it in there. Yeah, but the guy can't put touch on something 5 yards out.
Yep.
So
Derek
we've
Anderson,
seen that before.
DA, baby.
Exactly. Now, the interesting thing is mentioned Daniel Jones, and I'm going to sort of slightly evolve the take a little bit. And what I think, and I'm not saying this for hyperbole, I would not be surprised at all if the New York Giants look at him as an Eli clone, specifically. Temperament, size, arm strength, ability, everything just feels like, at the worst, a poor man's Eli Manning. At the high end, good Eli. I don't think he'll ever beat the Patriots Eli, but we'll see. But then again, coming back to, once you get out of those first four, and it kind of hurts my soul to not put Will Grier in that first round potential. Maybe he sneaks in, because I really do like that kid. But once you get past those guys, then it's like the receivers again. You're talking about what can you live with, what can't you live with. And, a colleague of mine asked recently, as a Browns fan, what quarterbacks are you interested in? And it said, Trace McSorley? Rippin? I mean, I'm looking at guys that are like 5th round on back, because I'm specifically looking at guys that are going to come in to specifically be dedicated backups.
Right.
And that's kind of what happens when you look at these quarterbacks outside the top 50. Once Will Grier goes off the board, Stidham goes off the board, I think what you're looking at is guys you can't put a lot of faith in that will eventually become a starting franchise quarterback, because, Rick, to your point, you can't really teach accuracy in the NFL. You can't teach decision-making to some degree once you get to the NFL. And some of these guys have some things. I just don't think that they're as hyped as they should be. And when it comes to even the first round, I got Kyler Murray going number 1, no questions asked. That's just how it is. After that, though, in my mock, I don't even think I have another quarterback going in the top 10, because I think these teams know that those guys will be there. And then you have the dynamic of Giants, Redskins, Dolphins, all in that team area. And I think half of those teams I just mentioned are probably willing to suck this year in hopes that they can get into the Fromm, Tua, and Lawrence sweepstakes.
Yeah, I think that's what they're looking at a year from now, and that's one of those things. I got to say, the man who taught me so much about the game of football and the limitations of the quarterback position in a dubious way was Derek Anderson, because you get fooled. For those of us that have played backyard football, I can't throw a 50-yard rope, but even I can throw a 15-yard slant. Certainly he can learn to do that. Not so much. He'll never throw the 15-yard slant that I can, which is mind-boggling to think of, but that's why he was a short-lived starter once he got exposed on that end of things. Now, I got to say here that there was something where, and Chris and I, in looking at this, Jason, just in giving this a sober-minded, fair-minded kind of a thing here, we did feel like there might have been a little bit of an overlook here on the draft rankings here at offensive tackle. Joe Lowry, an all-MAC, first-team MAC tackle there.
Here you guys go.
Yeah, I got to tell you, you're with me on this one, Chris. That guy is, he is a nice sleeper, is he not?
Oh, he's a lunch-tail guy. Blue collar is going to come in and work.
Good grief, you sound like Browns fans from 20 years ago.
I think that I think somebody's going to grab Joe Lowry, and I think they're going to make him a right tackle. He's not, he played left at Ohio, but someone's going to bring him in. Someone's going to grab him, I think, in round 6 or 7.
Sure hope it's us.
And I can tell you the Browns have met with him and worked him out, both at the Ohio Pro Day and at a private workout. So they have looked at him. So we'll see. I mean, he is, the interesting thing when we talk about our alma mater, I mean, there are a couple guys that I think are late round possibilities there that teams have been meeting with. And Lowry, certainly Joe Anderson, a guard, is another one that I think, again, that anywhere from that 5th, 6th, 7th round area could go, and of course a couple of guys like Happy White.
Yeah.
The Patriots worked him out. I mean, there's people checking out some of those guys, and we'll see what happens on draft day. More likely than not, one or two of them get strapped in late, and the rest are, they're going to be, free agents on the street signing with somebody.
A highly overlooked source of talent, Jason.
Well, let me be fair about this. It wouldn't be an FDH draft show without at least some reference of some Ohio Bobcat player.
That's right.
That being said, though, you guys don't have the worst track record with that.
Yeah,
I mean, you just look at some of these guys, some of these names, and they're not household names.
Mike Mitchell.
What's that?
Mike Mitchell. He's had a good career.
Mike Mitchell,
Yeah.
TJ Carey even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Blair Brown, I think, had some moments recently. So it's not like homerism for homerism's sake. I mean, there's some to that. And hey, Dorsey does like to really check every stone, as he says.
That's right.
So I wouldn't be shocked. I just don't expect him to, go in the first 2 days.
Yeah, I mean...
No, I agree. I don't think there's any Ohio player going in the first 2 days. I think anybody on that, the few guys that, that are out there that are getting looked at are, like A.J. Ouellette. I mean, they're all day 3 guys. And, it's kind of like quarterbacks. It's, like anything, it's just eye of the beholder. Somebody likes your work ethic. I mean, there's a guy, you talk Max, a guy like Max Sharping, he's going to go, he's going to go.
I like him a lot.
He might just sneak into the third round. He's a good prospect. And I'll tell you, I mean, just, watching him, I mean, there's not much daylight between him and Joe Lowry. So it's interesting that he gets a lot of hype, but Lowry doesn't. So, I'm curious to see. We'll find out, later this week how the league looks at him.
As they used to say on NBC, the more you know.
It's funny you bring up Sharping because I'm looking at one particular list, not mine, but someone else's, has Sharping as the 10th best offensive tackle prospect. And if you're telling me you think that the Ohio kid's that close, and he may go late second day. But if he's got size and movement, there's a place for him.
Yeah. Well, and I think Sharping is a guy that could play potentially left tackle. I still think Lowry's the kind of guy that I could see in the league for, 6 to 10 years at right tackle, potentially. And I think the Browns are working out a couple of those guys like him because Dorsey is not, Hubbard is, this is probably Hubbard's last year. They want another right tackle. And whether they, it's that 80 spot, they get a guy like the Chiefs out of West Virginia to slide over there.
Oh, that would be great.
He's going to get a right tackle. I think he knows Hubbard is, we're overpaying for a guy, the Browns are overpaying for a guy that's just not performing where they need him to be.
Yeah.
So I think definitely the Browns they'll be getting the right tackle somewhere.
Well, if you look at the draft this year specifically and how each individual breaks down, Jonah Williams, little arms, but, a tactician apparently. Apparently he's impressing people with his preparation. So he's a left tackle, but is he Joe Thomas? Is he Jason Peters? No, not at all. But when you start looking at it, Juwan Taylor could go in the top 10, and he is a dedicated right tackle. So a lot of these guys, and I mentioned earlier McGarry, you just mentioned Kajus, who I would love. If you tell me that we can get, Browns get the safety that will be a starter, and they can get a right tackle like one of those gentlemen, I'm done. I'm good for the rest of the draft. But yeah, I think there's a lot of guys in here that you look at and go, they're an offensive tackle. As a left tackle, I'm not interested. As a right tackle, I might reach for him, actually, depending on who we're talking about.
Sure. It all depends, as
I
usual.
agree with that. I really agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think if the Browns can get a guy like Thornhill at 49, And then a guy like Kipchus at 80, I'm with Jason. I'm like, okay, the rest of this draft is just pure gravy. Let me see what you can come up with, Dorsey.
By the way, and talking about this off air, I had teased this here. And Jason, I'd like you to repeat what you said off air here. I have tentatively pick 49 in the draft, Jonathan Abrams, safety out of Mississippi State, going to the Browns in that spot. Take it away, Jason.
They get Jonathan Abram at 49. First of all, it's highway robbery. Second of all, they get Abram, and I'm ahead. I'm probably a whole round ahead of Chris on the I'm good, everything is gravy from here on out. That's my dream scenario, is Jonathan Abram, because he might be, he's not a complete safety. You're not going to want to play him at the free spot, but we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
And he's just he's a lay the wood kind of hitter. And he's not a highlight hitter. He's trying to get you down. He's not trying to make some sensational sports center play. So I love that about him. I think he's a little bit more than your typical box safety. But yeah, I was doing my mock, and I had a hard time having him still on the board in the 30s. So if they get him at 49, that's remarkable. And if we combine that with Chris's take, and they end up getting Jonathan Abram, and they get Kajus, draft is a success.
Well, that was a less colorful rendition. I believe you said off here you'd run naked through the streets if they got him at 49.
Yeah. I think I said something about doing a naked chick in the street.
That's what I was looking for.
It's old school. Hey, everyone, we're going streaking in the quad.
That's right. That's right.
Not sure my neighbors will appreciate it, but,
From an outstanding movie, and I had another one in a similar vein on for inspiration today when I was doing my mock draft. I was watching Fist Fight for about the 10th time. So, yeah, sometimes Fist Fight, old school, whatever, those things can motivate you as you're finishing a product. So, as we are coming around here full circle on this, let's get to some notes we didn't get to from either of you guys. I'll start with you, Chris. Anything that we didn't talk about yet that we should be talking about?
Well, I just, I wanted to point out a few. I just kind of tried to grab a few nuggets that I think people should be looking for on day 3, and then maybe a couple of them sinking into day 2, and just kind of running through them. Guys I like that I think can play at the next level. We already mentioned the aforementioned District Joe Lowry from Ohio, but David Long, cornerback out of Michigan. I like him. I think he's a guy that, you get into that 4th round, maybe 3rd. He's a guy that, could end up playing a long time. Michael Dogby out of Temple. I really like him. He's kind of like a 5th, 6th rounder, probably kind of guy. He's a little undersized, but man, I love his motor. He's at 280, and you put another 10 pounds on him. Really athletic, disruptor. And I got to tell you, you know me, I'm not a Buckeye homer, but I do think Mike Weber really could be a very good pro with a long career. He does, in my mind, sure, he does everything right in terms of running the football, catching the football. I really like him as a pro prospect, probably more so than others. Andy Isabella, somehow I hope the Browns find a way to get him. I want a kid, I want a Cleveland kid who I think is going to be the next Edelman, and who grew up in Mayfield. That one just feels like it's for this roster. I really like the edge rusher out of Old Dominion.
Yes. O'Shamus
Zimini, or I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this. Some of these guys, I'm like, I'm watching film and I'm looking at YouTube tape and all that, going, I can't pronounce your name, but I really like what you're doing. Terrell Hanks, linebacker out of New Mexico State. Here's a guy. I think he's another kind of like 5th, 6th round Avery sort of diamond in the rough guy, like Bernard Avery was for the Browns last year. So keep an eye on him. And then, I already mentioned, just looking at my list, I already mentioned Josh Oliver, tight end out of San Jose State, I really like. And of course, Will Greer I mentioned. I did want to throw out one question to you guys because we didn't talk about him.
Yeah.
And that is Jeffrey Simmons. And what do you think? Where do you think he's going to end up going with, not only the personal history but the injury? Teams know he's a top 10 talent. Are they willing to do what the Cowboys did with Smith, the kid out of Notre Dame, and just be like, well, we're just going to basically, we're going to redshirt him a year on injury, and we know that going into next year we're going to get a legitimate top 10 defensive tackle. You think anybody grabs him?
Chris, I'll tell you this
round?
from the mocks. No, from the mock drafts, Jason's got him going 48 to Miami. I got him going 34 to Indy. So neither one of us has got him first round.
Yeah, I was waiting for that because I know there's a lot of Browns fans that are just fingers crossed and whatnot. But if he's healthy and we look past all the personal stuff, he's probably a top 10 talent, and he's probably the second best defensive tackle in this draft.
Right.
So somebody is going to get a steal because there's no way in this modern NFL he goes where he should.
Right.
With the player conduct policies and all that. He'll get punished essentially by sliding, and somebody will get him somewhere between, I would guess, 20 and 40. I was trying real hard to make him fall to the Browns, but then when you look at where I had him go, there's just no way. There's no way he makes it to 49. So it's interesting. And if I may just transition real quickly, what I like mostly that not everyone's going to get into, which is why they're going to tune into a show like this, is what happens after the first round or from say 25 on.
Right.
In that next, the next 75 picks.
Yep.
And what I find remarkably intriguing, and Chris mentioned O'Shane, and in that same vein, I kind of have Jalen Ferguson from Louisiana Tech in that same grouping with O'Shane.
Okay.
They're different players. O'Shane, I think, really could be a great 3-4 outside linebacker, and I think Jalen Ferguson is a straight-up hand-in-the-dirt kind of pass rusher. But when you look around beyond the first round and then beyond those guys, because those are the guys that you're looking at that are most likely going to have the kind of career that says they should have been a first-round pick and just barely weren't. But you've got other guys in that mix, in inside linebacker, outside linebacker, especially if you subscribe to this new NFL idea that you can get an outside linebacker in a 4-3 scheme that is, by and large, undersized. 6 foot to 6'2", no heavier than 240. There's some guys in here that are very intriguing. Vashon, I'm drawing a blank at the Vashon Johnson or Jackson, something like that, from Florida.
Yeah.
He looks like a safety, but man, I like watching him play. The other big thing in this draft, especially if you're a team that can't afford to go corner early, never fear, because this corner draft might be the best part, especially if you are looking outside of the top 20.
Right.
I know people are in love with Greedy Williams. I'm not in love with his consistency. Byron Murphy's legit. DeAndre Baker doesn't have the measurables that you hope for, but has the production that you hope for. And after that, when you're talking second round on, just follow me on this. Rocky Sin, Justin Lane, Justin Love, Amani, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, from Penn State, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who can play both safety and corner, probably a slot corner, if anything. Let me see here. We got Joe Juan Williams, Trayvon Mullen from Clemson. I even like the other guy from Clemson. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, there's a guy that's probably going to go in the 4th round or so.
Okay.
Also from Clemson. 6 foot, 215, can tackles, but can also cover. But not a guy you're going to take super high.
Right.
Lonnie Johnson from Kentucky. There have been some reports getting leaked out take that with a grain of salt for what it's worth, that have Lonnie Johnson at 6'2", 215 from Kentucky as the best cover corner in the draft. I don't know if I buy that, but I'll take him if the position is right. And Amon Marshall.
The Browns are high on him, I'll tell you that.
Oh, I hope so, because I would love to get him in a heartbeat. Amon Marshall from USC, he didn't run well at the Combine, but he's one of those guys I'm just going to rely on the tape. Yeah. But I think if you need a corner, you don't have to pick one in the first 50. You can wait and still get a guy that projects to be a starter. Now, is he CB1? Probably not. But which is great for teams like, a Cleveland Browns that have their perceived number one and just need someone better than who they have opposite him. And they can absolutely get him somewhere in the second or third round. So, we've covered a lot. Quarterback's underwhelming. Wide receiver, depending on what you're looking for, can be underwhelming. Tight end is top-heavy and so on. But, man, tackle, guard, center, defensive tackle, defensive end, outside linebacker, safety. I think you can still get solid contributing starters into picks that start with a 1 and have more than one number.
Well, yeah, very good point.
A lot of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and as far as it goes...
I would predict that Rocky Sin and both Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, don't be shocked if they both end up in the first round.
Yep.
That's the funny thing about this. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked.
A lot of mocks are showing it. A lot of mocks are showing that they could. And what you said about cornerback, Jason, just to peel back the curtain again, the positional rankings in the draft guide, the top 200, that's all you. The lion's share of the stuff in the guide is you. One of the things that I like to do is strengthen the draft by position. I like to go through and do the assessment on that, and that's why I have cornerback as just being very good. I don't have it as being great, because what separates the defensive line positions is you have guys that you can take up high, and then you have the depth later. At cornerback, it's exactly like you said. The value isn't up high, but the depth is tremendous of it. You mentioned about Greedy Williams a couple of years ago. They had Ego Ferguson, who graduated from there. On a similar note, I'd like to commend LSU for their recent signing of 5-star recruit Sloth Jefferson. I look forward to great things from him in the years to come here for LSU as well. But anyways, I want to thank both of you guys for joining the program here. This preview, outstanding as per always. Knew that it would be. Hope to be able to convene with the both of you afterwards for another tradition of ours and break the thing down and see how it went. So, again, a lot of fun, a lot of great stuff as per always. Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this, my man.
Hey, thank you. Anytime. I always enjoy these shows.
Thank you. We always enjoy doing it with you. And Jason, same to you. The big kahuna of our draft coverage with, again, the rankings and the top 200 board and a mock draft along with mine and all of the heavy lifting in the draft guide that is yours, Jason. Great stuff and great stuff here in the taping tonight.
I appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Something I look forward to. It's a little weird this time around.
Yeah.
We're not talking about being excited up front, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that makes, as Chris alluded to earlier, people are becoming more educated, whether that has to do with the frequency of stuff. But, this draft, for even the casual fan, will probably be fun and entertaining through at least the first 3 rounds.
Well, I think I can bring it full circle by saying this, and something I think we can all agree upon. For everybody out there in the other 31 NFL cities and fans elsewhere, having a strong personal stake in the first round, it's highly overrated, people. It's highly overrated. A little bit of detachment. This detachment that we feel, to me, is so much better than the anticipation of years past because of what it means and what it means going forward. So, on the other side of this thing, once the picks are all in, as I say, we'll hopefully get the 3 of us back together and break it all down again. In the meantime, everybody, thank you for having joined us for FDH Lounge Mini episode number 1110.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the periodic table of elements.